My fellow Americans.
Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, the House of Representatives.
There can be no peace in the world until
all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Congress's power to pass legislation creating a military draft is derived from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years.
And also Clause 18, which gives Congress the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers.
If the United States restored the draft, the following would occur. First, Congress would pass legislation initiating a draft. The President would then sign this legislation into law. Second, a lottery based on birthdays would be used to establish the order in which registered men would be called for potential service. The next step would be the activation of all parts of the selective service system. The first men called upon by the lottery would then undergo physical, mental, and moral evaluation at a military entrance processing station. After they received the results of this evaluation, they would have 10 days to file a claim for exemption, postponement, or deferment. These claims would then be processed by local and appeal boards. Registrants deemed fit to serve would receive induction orders and have 10 days to report to a local military entrance processing station. These draftees would then be inducted and delivered to the military.
I think when you talk to most people within the military, they will almost universally agree that the all-volunteer Army and military is by far a more effective fighting force than with the draft. So I think most people are against having a mandatory draft, and I would tend to agree with that.
I think drafts can be necessary in some situations.
Yes. I think it's okay as a last resort, super last resort. Yeah.
I only think that a draft is necessary when a country is about or has declared war.
I really, rather than drafting people, I would really rather people understand they have a responsibility and choose the military option as one of those avenues where they can serve their country best.
We could have some type of mandatory government service, whether it's security, working in our schools, working in our hospitals, our airports. There's so many things that young people can do, but as relates to drafting in terms of allowing people to be placed in harm's way, I really think it has to be serious enough for the Commander-in-Chief, with the support of the Congress, to know that we will be engaged in a war.
At the moment, only men between the ages of 18 and 25 are legally obliged to register for the draft. The issue of whether women should be drafted for service has been debated since the first draft took place in 1940.
There's a range of opportunity in our armed forces and beyond, and so I think that we don't have to worry so much about you can't do this because you're a woman and you should only do this because you're a woman, but make sure that people are able to meet the responsibilities that they're given and given the opportunity to do as much as they can.
The country's at war, that the country has an obligation to call those people indiscriminately, men and women between 18 and 42, no exceptions.
In addition to the issue of gender, economic factors play an important role in the military draft discussion and can be quite controversial.
I'd like to see the numbers instead of just what you're saying about the rich being represented. When I was in Vietnam, I was drafted, and I'll tell you, they had to get around all the protests after that debacle they called a war, which was a police action. And in order to do that, they went to an all-volunteer military so they could start these Iran-Contras and all these illegal little wars you got going on to protect big business. We need to reinstitute the draft.
Under the volunteer system, which we have, so few people are called upon to sacrifice and perhaps lose their lives. And as long as the economics is a consideration and not a race for patriotism, it would seem to me that it's just totally immoral and unfair for this small group of people to be overseas and back home there is absolutely no sacrifice, not in terms of men and women power, not in terms of taxes, not in terms of any sacrifice. It should not be that you are looking for employment, because I think that in your research you will see that most of the volunteers come from communities with the highest unemployment.
I think certainly incentives are important. I don't think anybody that goes into the military, or should I say very few people that go into the military, are going strictly for the benefits and the pay and everything. That said, it certainly does encourage people, if they have an interest, to make it more available to them.
It's very difficult economy. There are people who are going to leave the service and really not necessarily know where they're going to work. They're not going to know where they're going to live. They're not going to know whether or not they can just resume their lives, whether the health care that they need would be readily available. That has to stop. I think that if we are putting this national service as a priority, then people who do that and choose to do that should know that when they return, they will be rewarded, quote unquote, with those things that we know they need in order to continue creating a life that really reflects the ideals that we fight for.
Aside from opinions regarding the draft itself, popular culture throughout the years has documented public anti-war sentiment.
Draft Dodger Rag is a satirical anti-war song by Phil Oakes, a U.S. protest singer from the 1960s known for being a harsh critic of the American military-industrial complex. Give Peace a Chance, written by John Lennon, quickly became the anthem of the American anti-war movement during the 1970s. Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire features the burning of draft cards and the peace movement during the Vietnam draft.
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12 is important to us because we are almost at the age when we are required to register with selective service.
If the draft is reinstated, we will then be subject to the draft lottery. With the wars in the Middle East over the course of the past decade, the issue of the draft has been raised again and again.
Through our research, we have seen and heard many viewpoints, from those in favor of the draft to those who support it as a last resort to those who are opposed to it.
We have delved into the issues of gender and financial factors. Some believe incentives are beneficial, while others believe they are a hindrance to equality.
The topic of mandatory service or service as personal responsibility also came up in discussion. This is an interesting idea in tune with the patriotism we sense while conducting interviews.
While there is still disagreement about these issues, many people do agree that all of us, as Americans, should give back in some way to a country which has given us so much.
God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.